everyone, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Green Day, Saviors. Green Day is a California punk rock band, and they are back after their massively disappointing return album, Father of All, which honestly was an album I couldn't imagine them sinking any lower, and thankfully they did not sink lower on this one. However, I don't think this is a very good return at all, really. But before we get into it, I am not a Green Day hater. I do love some Green Day. I do love their album Dookie, and I do love their album Nimrod. My main critique with Father of All was just taking the most outdated, dead cliches and trying to breathe life back into those genres while gargling dog piss. That is basically what I got from that. And unfortunately, those cliches do appear on this album once again. And also I feel like the flaws on American Idiot run through on here, lyrically, where it becomes very apparent if you are a political person, if you do realize the societal ills of today and the depth of them, then you know, anyone knows that they are barely scratching the surface on this album. I just prefer the fun, silly bangers and the personal bangers that are on Nimrod and Dookie. That is what I want. That is what I want from my Green Day. The fun, catchy anthemicness of Green Day. I just want that. Because I feel like the political angle, the rock cliche angles just make for a terrible, terrible album. Because they're just taking melodies at this point and just being so bland and stale and lackluster with it. Like on One-Eyed Bastard, where you can't tell me that this song doesn't sound like Iggy Pop's Passenger mixed with a fucking car commercial. And I'm not gonna act like going into this album I had high hopes. I definitely didn't. Especially on tracks like American Dream. Sure, I could compliment the instrumentation of the track. That's a given. I think the riffs are very anthemic, but a lot of this just comes off as sloganeering. And I don't expect every song to have a solution to world's problems, but just an idea, just more insight, just more, I guess, elaboration on what's going on, maybe critique it a little deeper than they can, but they're barely doing that here, especially addressing how toxic and bigoted and problematic the American dream actually is. But it's just so surface level. And that PDF line, kind of weird, which I know they are speaking from the perspective of the corruption in America, sure, but it's definitely not a good look, especially when you just did a Gary Glitter cover on the abomination that is called Father of All. And also Dilemma, which just sounds like a really blown out Weezer track, with some really played out 50s rock tropes and a weird James Bond style outro. And Look Ma No Brains, where they are going back to their roots just a little bit, but the outcome is just not what it used to be. They're just trying to rehash what they did before, and it really shows they're running out of ideas. And that is one thing about this album. It definitely lacks new ideas. A lot of this stuff just comes off very stale and not fresh at all. And as I alluded to earlier, just rehashing the same cliches, the same political aesthetic as they did on American Idiot, where you're bringing up these important issues, sure, like global warming, sure, and referencing old wars, but you're doing that while describing this girl that you're infatuated with, and it's kind of gross as you're using these as like a prop to tell this story. It just comes across as gross window dressing. Not as worse as She's a Rebel, but pretty close. And they continue to incorporate more cliches that have died a long time ago and shouldn't have came back. Like on Coma City, where they're trying to reinvent something out of the Starship catalog with bland riffs that were played out in the 80s. There's barely any punching guitars, and the vocals are so way overproduced. And again, I will admit that this album does touch on important subjects like air pollution, gun violence, which they do a few times here, but the lyrics come off so defeatist. You're addressing the issues on this track while simultaneously being so milquetoast about it. It's like you're pretty much telling people stuff they already know without any clever lyrics, any solution here. And again, not saying that every music has to have a solution, but at least something to open up the mind or spark the brain. And also the ham-fisted Strange Days, where they have a lyric where they're sounding like they're trying to attribute David Bowie's death to the problems of society today, due to the world's problems. And trust me, I do love some David Bowie. A lot of David Bowie. But to name drop and act like things were hunky-dory, no pun intended, while he was alive is absolutely laughable. And also, to make it even more laughable, is giving the idea that, oh, if David Bowie was here, the world would be so much better. We wouldn't have all these problems. But ever since Bowie passed away, the world has just been in shambles. But if he was here, he would make a difference. He would make a difference. Like when David Bowie was here, we didn't have the war on drugs. We didn't have redlining. We didn't have fascism against migrants. Like, this album is so blind when it comes to its politics on this, at least most of the time. And again, I respect them for addressing it, but lyrically it just comes off so milquetoast. And instrumentally, a lot of these tracks are way overproduced, vocals way overproduced, because the sentiments here could have led for potential for a great song, great ballads, like the endearing father to a son, but it's just so overly done, so overly sentimental, so glitzy. And Goodnight Adeline, I like the tune, but it's just another overproduced ballad on this album. But there are some highlights here, I will admit. I did enjoy the cute and anthemic Bobby Sox. I do like the call let the audience respond refrain on this track. Do you wanna be my girlfriend? And also with Billy being a member of the queer community, I also do like how he put the option of boyfriend in here as well, and best friend. And I enjoy how passionate the vocals are on this track, with different sweet cheeky scenarios, great riffs, love the guitar melodies, and the breakdowns. I feel like Green Day are really playing to their strengths on this track, or the socially aware effervescent Living in the 20s. And don't worry, it's not a ham-fisted cover of Killing Joke's Living in the 80s, which honestly, had they done a Living in the 80s and done it well, it might be a W, might be an L, but I do like the way they went about constructing this track. I do like the clever songwriting as they're addressing gun violence, toxicity in the media, pretty much with the overall message of the illusion that because we went into another decade, things would be better. With a new leader, things would be better. But due to the shithole we were left in previously, things have just gotten worse and worse. And I do like the clever lyrics placed here, like another shooting in the supermarket, I spent my money on a bloody soft target. But yeah, overall, this album, while not as bad as Father of All, not really as bad as 21st Century Breakdown, but I feel everything that made those albums terrible, they've applied a lot onto this album. Whether it's the ham-fisted songwriting on addressing certain issues, whether it's the bland, stale tropes that have died a long time ago. And yeah, while there are some moments on here where there is improvement, it's just so kneecapped by the mediocrity in the songwriting, the overproduction, and honestly, it just leaves me just wanting them to return to form, be consistent, and just make bangers again. And I know they're a pop punk band, but that's really no excuse when you have a fantastic album from Jeff Rosenstock, Hell Mode, which actually reflects on politics in his album and actually does it well and actually does it thoroughly, but still makes it catchy, which I feel Green Day could have done, but instead they just went at it at a very haphazard way. So if the songs are better written, the tracks that could have been highlights were less overproduced, I think this could have been a great album. But I'm feeling a 1.5 hearts on this one. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling. But if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And why? And that's it. Caspa, Green Day, Saviors, till we meet again.